ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम्। नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे फुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयः प्रदीपः न पारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावः दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं। भीष्मद्रोणतटा जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोत्पला शल्यग्राहवती कृपेण वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला। अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोत्तीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैरणनदी कैवर्तकः केशवः। पाराशर्यवचः सरोजममलं गीतार्थगन्धोत्कटं नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधनाबोधितं। लोके सज्जनषट्पदैरहरः पीयमानं मुदा भूयाद्भारतपङ्कजं कलिमल प्रध्वंसिनः श्रेयसे। मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम्। यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः। ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनः यस्यान्तन्न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः। We said in our last session that up to the verses 30, Lord Krishna addressed what we will call the universal problem, meaning the human problem of ignorance. And also therefore said that the grief that we have in our life is only caused by ignorance of the self. And therefore in these 20 verses, the nature of the self was revealed, knowing which there is no cause for grief, because when we know the self as self and the non-self as non-self, then we realize that none of them could be the cause of grief. It's only when the self is thought to be non-self is thought to be self, and the attributes of non-self are again superimposed upon the self. And when this ignorance and the superimposition that ignorance brings about, when this is there, then alone there is a cause for grief and not otherwise. So when Sat is known as Sat and Asat is known as Asat, there is no cause of grief. This is what was said and concluded in those verses. And then from the verses 31 to 36, or I should say 38, in these verses Lord Krishna is addressing essentially the particular problem that Arjuna has, a situational problem that Arjuna has. Inasmuch as the original confusion that there is in the mind and the general sadness that pervades the mind also is responsible for the kind of confusions and delusions we have in our day-to-day situations. So even the difficulties, the problems that we have in our day-to-day situations also can be traced to this fundamental problem, namely ignorance. And whereas that problem is common to everyone, the day-to-day problems will vary with different people depending upon their disposition of mind and whatever. And therefore, the problem that Arjuna had here was a choice between whether to fight or not to fight. And as I explained the other day, that he knew that he was a Kshatriya, and therefore his duty is to respond to the situation by making himself available to protect the dharma or protect righteousness. Because it is dharma or the righteousness that in turn will protect the society. So, therefore he considers it to be his duty to do that. However, inasmuch as a duty calls for a battle, fighting a battle, which would involve a lot of destruction or loss of life, so he thinks that that also is a very, very wrong thing to do because it involves himsa or violence. So here of course is a question of interpretation of a certain value. This is a classical case because every value has to be interpreted in a given situation. Satya or the truthfulness is a value. Ahimsa, non-violence is a value. All these are values. And these values have to be interpreted in particular situations. So values as lived in a particular situation will depend upon the time, place and conditions. And here it was a matter of Arjuna's interpreting the value of ahimsa or non-violence. So he interpreted this loss of life that would definitely result from the battle as himsa or violence. And on the strength of that he says that he does not think that he would want to fight this battle. But more than that, his original problem is that he took himself to be the violator. So he took himself to be the individual being who would be responsible for this violation. And that is what he could not stand. Violence of course, but then that I would be the killer. And that also he could not stand. So if the self is known as the one who does not kill, nor does it get killed, then of course that fundamental problem would not have arisen. But that subsequently led him, because he could not accept himself in the role of a killer. So he thought he was doing that. Therefore he could not accept also this action of killing. And therefore his mind sought an explanation for avoiding this particular action. And thus his mind discovered that this should be interpreted as himsa or violence. So this interpretational part of Arjuna is really is influenced by his misconception about himself and his misconception, of course, about the realities of life. And therefore also this stand on his part is not a very proper stand, because this is not the first time that he has fought the battles and not first time that people are killed at his hands. And he never thought anything wrong in them so far. At this time, he starts thinking about this whole situation has become extremely intense for him. In any way, Lord Krishna also has to address this particular problem of how to interpret the value of ahimsa in this situation. That non-violence does not necessarily always mean an avoidance of injury or even killing. If it serves a larger purpose of saving the life. And so this battle would have to be looked upon as a kind of a surgery that a surgeon has to perform. That if a particular part of the body is rotting, or if something has happened there, if it is left as it is, because it would involve violence to destroy that, those cells or whatever it is, then it would definitely affect the rest of the body. And that is how the whole body would have to be sacrificed. So very often it becomes necessary even to perform a certain amount of violence in order that an overall non-violence is achieved. The action of a surgeon of performing surgery is a very typical illustration. And in that sense also, Arjuna's action can be looked upon. That no doubt his action would involve the death of many people. And certainly everyone should avoid, but it could not be avoided. Not only that, but these people found themselves in the battle without their choice and found themselves in a position or in a requirement that they have to protect the dharma or the righteousness. That the action that is to perform can be compared to the action of a surgeon. The Duryodhana and all these people represent that part of the society which is like a rotten part. And any attempt, it's not that you go for surgery right away. You make all possible attempts to cure that disease and cure that situation. And only when you find that the medicines and other things won't help, then alone you go for surgery. So surgery is usually the last resort that anyone takes. You always do everything else that is possible. And here also, all possible attempts were made to avoid this battle, and it could not be avoided, and therefore surgery essentially became a necessary thing. And so it is destroying the evil. When you cannot correct the evil, to correct the evil should be the first option. And all attempts should be made because there should be, one should oppose the sin and not the sinner. However, very often it happens that the sin and sinner are so identified that you cannot eliminate the sin unless something is done with the sinner. If that's the kind of a situation, then then there are court of laws, and then you have to punish the people and do what is necessary because there is no other way. And here also, that the sinner, meaning the Duryodhana and all his people, could not in any way be corrected, and therefore the only way that was left was the evil could be destroyed only by destroying them. Otherwise, they would completely corrupt the whole society, and that is how bring about suffering at a much larger scale. And that is how what is called dharma yuddha, or yuddha or battle for the protection of dharma or righteousness can be justified only in that sense. And keeping that in mind, so Lord Krishna means here that this action is not to be interpreted as himsa or violence, but this action is to be interpreted as performance of one's duty, which duty has come upon oneself. That is called duty, which you find having to do. So duty is that which the situation or a condition places upon you. And therefore, the situation requires to respond in a given manner because you happen to perform or you happen to be in a certain role. And with every role there is what we call a script. And that script alone is called dharma or righteousness. And thus the situation has come to Arjuna where he has to perform that role. And he has to follow the script that is appropriate to the role, and it is that which Lord Krishna is telling him in the subsequent verses. Thus in the verse 31, says here, Swadharmo vichāvekshya navikampitu marhasi dharmyad yuddhat shreyonyat kshatriyasya na vidyate. So there is no question that from the standpoint of the truth or the reality, that there is no scope for grief or delusion. But even for Arjuna, from the standpoint of the situation called dharma, also there is no cause for him to have grief or delusion. So Lord Krishna says, Swadharmam apicha avekshya. So Swadharmam, Swadharmaha. One's own dharma is called Swadharma, one's own dharma. Now we explain what is dharma. Dharma is a kind of response that is in keeping with one's own disposition of the mind as well as one's own situation, one's own role in a given situation. As we discussed last Thursday, the division of work in the society was in keeping with the disposition of the people. So therefore there were Brahmins who were basically teachers, the scholars, the people whose basic function was to learn and teach, and thus to maintain the parampara or the tradition of knowledge and the tradition of dharma, righteousness. Kshatriyas were those people whose duty was to protect the society. They were the leaders and they were the rulers. But the ruling or the leadership which takes into account the welfare of the people and not their own welfare. So this is the Kshatriya, or the leader class, or the ruler class, the warrior class. And third, who possess the strength and disposition to do that particular job. Third are, as we said, the business class people who are not selfless people, for whom their own interest comes first, but then they have that knack of making profit, of producing, of distribution, etc. And therefore their job was to produce and distribute. So they were business or the trading people. And fourth were the people who didn't even have those skills. And therefore they were basically good for physical work. And those who did not have that kind of initiative or the creativity, but those who always needed to be instructed. So they were the fourth class of people. And therefore, dharma or the duties were enjoined for different class of people, depending upon, as you said, their station of life and also their disposition of mind. Understand that even for one person, the duty would vary depending upon what station of life that person is in. Because the life was divided into 4 stations or 4 stages. As a person matures, in the first stage, it's roughly 1/4 of the lifespan was looked upon as the time for study. And only study, and no other political activities, and no essentially even social activities. Basically devotion to study. That's called brahmacharya, life of brahmacharya. Second, the portion of the life was looked upon as the life of a householder. When the person becomes young, and he has now gained all the necessary knowledge for leading his life, and then he enters the life of householder, and then performs karma, then he gains his enjoyment of life, he produces, he serves the society also, and gets served in the process. Third was the stage of life which we call retirement, where having done what was to be done in the life, having performed one's duties, having fulfilled one's obligations, and also having gained the basic pleasures of life in keeping with certain basic codes of conduct, the person now feels that he or she has done what is to be done in life and now ready for retirement. So the third was the stage of retirement. And generally the custom was that the parents, when they reach this age of retirement, would basically leave home and hand over all the duties and all the household responsibilities to the son, eldest son, and the parents would leave. Go to the forest and live in a hut, and then the husband and wife would live together, all right, but live as friends, and basically lead the life of austerities, of penance, of worship. This was the third stage of life. And as they mature further, and when they are ready to now give up every final relationship also, and any kind of security, and their quest for knowledge also has become more intense, then fourth was the life of what we call sannyasa, or the renunciate, which was essentially the life of a wandering monk, or the life wherein one goes and lives with the teacher and studies the scriptures. So even within the life of a person also, there are these 4 stations of life. So the duties are determined by what is one's disposition as well as what is the station of life. And accordingly, there would be an appropriate thing for a person to do in a given situation. And if the work distribution is ideal, then what one has to do is also what one likes to do. Because everyone has a certain disposition of mind, certain aptitudes. And if the work that is before you also is in keeping with your aptitude, then you like to do what you have to do. So if what you have to do is what you like to do, that is the ideal situation. And that is the whole idea of this work distribution according to varna and ashram, according to caste and the stage of life. And that is basically what we call swadharma, swadharma, one's own dharma, meaning one's own duty based on one's disposition of mind. In case of Arjuna, it is kshatriyasya dharma. Arjuna was a kshatriya, or a warrior caste person, and therefore his dharma in this case was to protect the dharma, protect the righteousness. tamapi avekshya. So keeping in mind even your own dharma, keeping in mind your own duty. So very often the duty would require you to do something unpleasant also. It is not that duty is always pleasant. Duty can be unpleasant also. You may have to perhaps act in a firm manner and may have to take what you might call unpleasant decisions also, but that also is part of duty. And that unpleasantness also would not be considered as violence if that unpleasantness also is meant for an overall good. And so life is always going to involve things that are unpleasant. Just because it's unpleasant doesn't become violence if it is in keeping with the basic order. And so Arjuna, you have to do an unpleasant task, you're all right. But understand that it is a dharma, meaning it is proper thing to do. And this here is a classical case where what Arjuna has to do is not what he likes to do in given state of mind. But Arjuna at the moment is not acting as a Kshatriya. If he acts as a Kshatriya, then he will not have a conflict. But right now, on account of this grief and delusion, Arjuna has lost that fervor of a Kshatriya, or lost the spirit of a Kshatriya. And he is acting more as a person who is totally overcome by tamas or dullness and delusion. Because in 18th chapter Lord Krishna reminds him that yadahankaram ashritya nayotseti manyase mithyaisha vyavasayaste prakritistvam niyokshade. Here Arjuna, ahankaram ashritya, taking refuge of ahankara or the ego, you are saying that I will not fight. But this vyavasaya or this decision on your part is in fact mithya, is false. Because prakritistvam niyokshade. You will find that once this period of grief goes away, and once your original nature now begins to assert, then you will find that again it is going to control you. And so it is the dharma of the Kshatriya. Nibaddhasvena karmana kartum nechyasi yanmohat karishyasi avashopitat svabhavajena kauntaya nibaddhasvena karmana. Hey Kauntaya, hey Arjuna, your svabhava, your nature is that of a Kshatriya. So he is very active and also aggressive. But aggressive for the purpose of righteousness, they say. This is your nature. You are not at the moment prepared to lead the life of a sannyasi or a contemplative life because there is too much energy inside. And life of contemplation requires that one has essentially resolved that and one has discovered that contemplative frame of mind. At the moment Arjuna is not in that frame of mind, and therefore even if he chooses the life of contemplation, and why does he choose that life of contemplation? Not because he has a great love for that, but because he dislikes this. So his desire to get away from the battlefield and become a renunciate has not arisen out of a maturity or of an understanding of what renunciation is, but that desire has arisen because he has a dvesha or an aversion for what he has to do at the present, and therefore there is an artificial attraction for something because that promises him to escape this particular situation. So this is more an escape. And very often it is presented as some kind of an ideal, and this is the problem with Arjuna in this case. Says Arjuna, once you are over this with this mood, then you will find that your nature will start asserting itself. And what at the moment you don't want to do, you will wind up doing it anyway. So that is how Lord Krishna says, keeping your own dharma in mind, keeping your own nature in mind, as well as keeping in mind the particular situation which requires you to respond in a certain manner. I don't think that you have to feel guilty in any way. I don't think that you have to feel bad for doing what you are required to do. Na vikampitum arhasi, na prachalitum arhasi. You should not get shaken. You should not get so much, you should not have the sense of guilt and so much amount of conflict within yourself. Swabhavikat dharmat atma swabhavyat iti abhiprayah. Meaning, you should not deviate from that which is a dharma, that which is a duty, which arises from your own nature. It is not that the task that is at the moment presented to Arjuna is against his nature. Suppose such is the case, that you find yourself in a situation wherein you have to perform a task which is just totally against your nature, then it's a different thing. But Arjuna's nature is that of a Kshatriya. And therefore, Lord Krishna says that he wants to become a Brahmin or he wants to become a renunciate. So essentially, the renunciate enjoys the disposition of a Brahmana, a contemplative disposition, whether it is by caste Brahmana or not. But essentially, only when one gains that disposition, which is sattvic, which is predominant in sattva, which sattva, as we said, is contemplativeness, tranquility, freedom from conflict, then alone one is fit for being a renunciate. And therefore, he wants to give up his own dharma. Arjuna at the moment wants to give up his own dharma of a Kshatriya and wants to assume the dharma or the duty of a Brahmana or of a renunciate. And that is how he wants to deviate from his own dharma. Lord Krishna says, there is no reason why you should deviate from your dharma of a Kshatriya and then take refuge into the dharma of a renunciate. Keeping in mind your own nature as well as what the particular situation calls for. Why is it so? Tatcha yuddham prithvi jayadvarena dharmartham prajarakshanartham chedi dharmat anapetam param dharmyam. Because this particular yuddha or this battle that is in front of you is for what? Prithvi jayadvarena. By conquering the Prithvi, meaning conquering the earth, meaning conquering, gaining a victory, dharmartham, it is going to protect the dharma by, as we said, eliminating that evil aspect of the society, and that is how providing protection to the good people, because they require protection. This is what always happens in every society, that people who are law-abiding, people who are good-natured, people who are on the path of righteousness, require protection. Because they are not generally strong in arms, etc. And that's the reason why we have this police force and whatever it is, because these people require protection. So, prajarakshanartham, dharmartham, you'll be able to protect the people as well as you'll be able to protect the righteous people. How do we protect righteousness? By protecting righteous people. And therefore, by eliminating these people who are a threat positively to the righteous people in the society, you'll be able to protect the people who are righteous, and thus will be able to protect the righteousness, praja rakshanartham, and will be able to protect the praja or the subjects in general. And therefore, this yuddha, this battle is dharmyam, dharmat anapetam, in keeping with dharma or in keeping with the righteousness. So even though apparently this yuddha involves violence, it is still in keeping with in dharma or in keeping with righteousness or overall order, only because this is, as we said, comparable to surgical action which is called for in order to protect the rest of the society. So dharmyadhi, he means because dharmyad yuddhyat kshatriyasya anyat shreya na vidyate. For a kshatriya, for the one who possesses the kind of disposition that Arjuna possesses, for such a person, not yuddha but dharmyad yuddhyat, a yuddha or a battle which is in keeping with dharma, which is in keeping with righteousness. There is nothing better or superior for a kshatriya than having an opportunity to participate in a battle which is for the protection of dharma. Because he has that energy and he has that kind of a nature. And if you have to fight, the fighting for the right cause is a right kind of thing. And so this battle which is for the right cause is the most appropriate thing for a kshatriya to do. And you are a kshatriya, and therefore for you there is nothing better than this, the situation in which you find yourself to be. If this battle was merely for kingdom, if this battle was just for the selfish purpose of their getting the kingdom and enjoying the pleasures, perhaps it may not have been justified. Inasmuch as this battle is for protection of dharma, and that requires them to win the battle, therefore it is in keeping with dharma. So that's one reason why yuddham kartavyam, that you should fight in this particular situation. Kotaschatad yuddham kartavyam. What is another reason also why it is proper that Arjuna should fight this battle? Now this is a matter of belief. That's what the second one says. Has to do with the cultural belief. What the first one says is in keeping with the basic, the code of conduct. What the second one says depends upon the belief that the Hindus had and perhaps continue to have. So that is also the reason why it is proper for you to fight this battle. It says in verse 32, Yadruchaya chopapannam swargadvaram apavrutam sukhinah kshatriyah partha labhante yuddhamidrisham. So this yuddha of the battle is Yadruchaya upapannam. This battle is upapannam in agatam. It has come to you, Yadruchaya, not by your own desire. Yadruchaya means by aprarthitaya, without your having asked for it. It has come to you unasked. So this battle has come to you, this particular situation has come to you unasked, that you have not invited it or that you are not responsible for creating the situation. That's one thing. Swargadvaram apavrutam. And what does the battle do for a Kshatriya? Now the belief is that if a warrior fights the battle and dies in the battlefield, then straight away he goes to heavens. This is the belief. Accepting that there is a region called heavens where everybody wants to go because everybody cherished or desired to go to heavens, because that's a place where there is all pleasure of all kinds. And so Vedas also enjoin a number of rituals which when one performs, one would qualify also to go to heavens. So many people used to perform, but those rituals are quite intricate, quite elaborate, and have to perform essentially for the lifetime. So if you perform certain rituals very sincerely, with all faith and devotion, and for a great length of time, then usually you are qualified to go to heavens. And that also would happen. That depends if the rituals were performed properly. That's for a Brahmin or for other people. But what about a Kshatriya? For Kshatriya it is simple, that if he fights a battle in protection of Dharma, and if he is killed in the battlefield, then straight away he goes to heaven without any intervention at all or any interference. This is what is said. So, Swargadvaram apavrutam. This battle in fact has opened for you the gates of heavens. That suppose you happen to die, fighting this battle, then also straight away you go to heavens. And therefore also, because heavens is something that is desirable for everyone, and that's another reason why you should fight this battle. Says Sukhinah Kshatriyah Partha Labhante Yuddham Idrisham. In fact, those Kshatriyas, like you Idrisham Yuddham Labhante. So those people who are fortunate, who have the opportunity to fight in a battle like this, are Sukhinah. They are really fortunate people. So Lord Krishna says that in fact those people who are presented with the opportunity to participate in a battle like this, which is dharma, meaning in keeping with dharma, Swargadvaram apavrutam, which opens the gate of heavens for the warriors, and Kshatriyas such as these are really fortunate. So Arjuna, you are really a fortunate person, and therefore you must thank your stars that you have an opportunity to fight in this battle, because it opens the gate of heavens for you. Thus in these two verses, Lord Krishna said that now a man looks for two kinds of benefits, iha and amutra, here and elsewhere, in this life and life hereafter. So since Hindus believed and believe that there is rebirth, that the existence of a person does not come to an end merely by the cessation of this body, that being born in this body or this embodiment, that this body is a station, it is an abode, and therefore you just give up this body when its purpose is served, and then take up another embodiment. And therefore, when you lead your life here, at least this makes you aware that you are responsible for all that you do. You cannot get away merely by giving up this body, or that your plight does not come to an end merely because his body has come to an end. That's the reason why people were extremely responsible. So they always thought twice when they perform an action as to what result that action will have. And many people always wanted to make sure that at the time of death and after death, that they don't have to enter this hell or the suffering. On that, they have a proper life, hereafter also. So, while performing actions here, people were always conscious about their welfare here as well as welfare hereafter. Now, what is the welfare here that was said here? Arjuna was told that this is a battle which if you fight and win, then you will gain the kingdom, and that is how you will protect the people, you will protect the righteousness, and that is how your welfare in this life will be secured. And not only that, but on account of doing this action of protecting the dharma, you will definitely qualify for heavens after giving up this body, or if you happen to die in this battle, then also definitely right away you will go to heavens. And therefore, this battle will also assure you what we call the welfare hereafter. So, in the verse 31, Lord Krishna pointed out how this battle is a means of welfare here, meaning in this life, and the verse 32 pointed out how it is also a means for heavens, meaning the welfare hereafter. So here and hereafter, both these worlds are secured by Arjuna, and that's how Lord Krishna says how it is proper for Arjuna to fight to secure the welfare here and hereafter. And so one must show the benefits of performance of the duty. But one may say that, all right, I don't care. I don't want my welfare here and hereafter. Then may I give up this duty? He says no. There is also something to be lost if you do not perform the duty. That is called akarane pratyavaya. Pratyavaya meaning the punishment or the negative effect that you will accumulate if you fail to do what you have to do. So there is something called the need to do what one has to do. So failure to do a given thing at a given time also brings about a negative result. So not only doing the wrong thing or performing a sinful action will create a negative result, but then even failing to perform the right action at the right time also creates a negative effect. This is another belief that they have. And this is arrived at after a lot of analysis of the scriptures. And this belief is expressed in this famous expression, akarane pratyavaya. If you fail to perform your duty, meaning if you fail to do what is to be done, right thing to be done at the right time, then also it will generate for you a negative effect. And so you will have to bear the consequences of that also. So in the first two verses, Lord Krishna said, what is the benefit to be gained by performance of his duty? And now in subsequent verses, Lord Krishna says, suppose you fail, evam kartavyada praptamapi yuddham. Suppose this yuddha or the battle, which has come to you as a kartavya, as something to be done. Suppose you fail to do that, then it is not only that you will lose all the benefits that it has to give you, but then you will also invite what we call the negative effects, and that is what is said in the subsequent verses. Verse 33 says, Atha chet tvamimam dharmyam sangramam na karishyasi tatasvadharmam kirtim cha hitva papam avapsyasi. Atha chet, in case, in spite of having explained to you all this, atha chet, in case, tvamimam dharmyam sangramam na karishyasi. If you do not do, or if you do not fight this dharmyam sangramam, this righteous battle. Suppose you, in case you do not fight this battle which is a righteous action to perform, then what happens? You will be inviting what we call the sin or negative effect. Tatas swadharmam kirtim cha hitva papam avapsyasi. Then tataha swadharmam hitva. You would have given up your dharma. Dharma is, again, as we said, swadharma is a kshatriya's dharma. So you would have given up your dharma, meaning you would have given up your duty, and kirtim cha hitva, and also all your fame also will be gone. Arjuna is a very famous person. He is a very highly regarded person also, because he has fought battles with great people and conquered. Mahadevadi samagama nimittam kirtim. At one point in time, the story goes that Arjuna even fought battle with Lord Shiva. Interesting thing is, when these Pandavas were in the forest in exile for 12 years, 12 plus 1, at that time Arjuna took off from rest of them. He went to the forest and performed severe penance to please Lord Shiva. And that's exactly what he was doing. And his idea was to please Lord Shiva and acquire some weapons from Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva decided to test him. And where Arjuna was in the forest, at that time Lord Shiva, it seems, appeared in the form of a hunter. And there was a dog which the hunter had. And this dog started barking. Here Arjuna was performing penance and he was disturbed by the barking of the dog. So he was a very skilled archer. What he did is, he immediately threw his arrows, shot his arrows in series. He shot so many arrows that this dog opened his mouth, the arrows went into his mouth and just blocked it. And therefore the dog could not bark at all. He just stopped, That hunter was surprised. How did this happen? And that is how he realized here, and therefore he started, quarreling with Arjuna. Why did you do this to this dog and this and that? And that's how a fight ensued between them. And a great fight ensued. Of course, Lord Shiva being what is, ultimately he would overpower Arjuna. But Lord Shiva was highly pleased with the prowess of Arjuna. And then he revealed himself, said that I am Lord Shiva, I came here to just test you. And he was so pleased with Arjuna that he gave him a great weapon called Pashupatastra. A great weapon was given. And all of these were quite well known. So Arjuna was well known for his prowess. And he said, hey Arjuna, if you give up this battle and leave this battlefield, then all this name and fame that you acquired on account of your prowess, all of that also you will lose. Not only that, papam avapsasi. Not only that, but because your dharma you will lose, therefore papam avapsasi. You will in fact acquire what we call sin. Because he is present and things should be done. And he permits, suppose, the evil to take over. And that is how, on account of that, suppose a number of people have to suffer. Then Arjuna, by not having performed the action also, becomes a party to all that suffering that comes to the people. And that is how he also gains. This is another important thing. That in a given situation, you have to do a certain thing. If you don't do that, as a result of that, some suffering comes or some evil happens. Then you also become a party to it indirectly. Even though you may say, I did not do anything. But you failed to do what you should have done. And that is how also you become a party to the sinful action. Even though it may be performed by someone else. If you were in the position to stop it and you did not stop it. And that is how you become a party. This is, all of these are a matter of belief anyway. But this is what these scriptures say, and we have no better reason to deny what they say anyway. So Lord Krishna says, papam avapsasi. And sin, they always are afraid of sin. They are all righteous people and always do that which is right. So one thing that they are afraid of is sin. Because sin will definitely deprive you of the heavens and will make you perhaps suffer the pains of hell. And therefore, kirtim, so you will definitely have to forsake all the pleasures of the heaven, meaning your well-being or welfare hereafter will definitely be lost. And Arjuna said, I don't care. If the heavens does not come to me, I don't mind. He says, well, it's not only that you will be deprived of the heavens, meaning of a welfare hereafter, but even while you are alive in this life also, you will be in a very miserable state. Why is it so? Na kevalam swadharma kirti parityagaha. Not only that, you will lose your swadharma, your own dharma as well as kirti, meaning the fame. Not only that, your fame will go, but akirtim cha vibhutani kathayishyandi te vyayam. Already your fame goes away and nobody now regards you, it doesn't matter. But akirtim, unfame. akirtim cha vibhutani kathayishyandi tevyam. Do you know, Arjuna, that you are such an important person? And the decision that you are making right now is going to be recorded in the history. And later on, when people talk about this battle, and talk about your race, and talk about your lineage, how are they going to talk about? Akirtim kathayisyanti tevyam. See, all these, in India we have what we call the Pauranikas, meaning those who go around and give discourses on Puranas, give discourses on such epics as Ramayana, Mahabharata. This is a very common practice in India, where the scholars and teachers, they go out into the public and give discourses, public discourses, based on all these sacred texts. And therefore, you talk about the past, you talk about this Mahabharata, you talk about this battle, you talk about Arjuna. And what terms will they talk about you? When they, akirtim cha vibhutani kathayisyanti tevyam. All the time they will sing, not your glories, but they will only sing your ill fame. Avyayam. And then, that ill fame which will last for a great length of time. Because more important a person you are, more likely you will be talked about for a greater length of time. In both ways. And Abraham Lincoln perhaps will be remembered for centuries. A Hitler also will be remembered for centuries. People will keep on talking about him. And for all the ill that he brought to the world, and all kinds of things that he did, will be talked about for generations. An ordinary person, he does something, people will talk about it and forget. But when someone like Hitler does something, well, that is remembered for a great length, because he enters these pages of history, and people keep on analyzing for generations to come. And therefore, akirtim cha vibhutani kathayisyanti tevyam. Hey Arjuna, all the people will talk about your akirti, your ill fame, for a great length of time. Akirti also means censure, in fact. So people will censure you for a great length of time for the kind of action that you are doing. And he says, I don't care. Suppose they censure me or ill fame, I don't care. He says, you don't know. But it would be extremely difficult for you to stand that. As long as it has not happened to you, well and good. Sambhavitasya akirtihi. If you are an ordinary person and never had much respect, disrespect doesn't matter much. Oh, what does it matter? I never had it to begin with, and therefore a few people talk ill of you, doesn't matter. But Arjuna is not like that. Sambhavitaha. The one who is held in high regard, high esteem. Dharmatma shuraha iti. Arjuna is known as Dharmatma, as a man of dharma, as a righteous person. Shuraha, a man of prowess, a man of valor, of prowess, of brave, was a very brave and courageous person. This is how you are very highly regarded by everyone in the society. And also regarded as a person who is a righteous person. So, dharmatma shuraheti gunahi sambhavitaha. So you are highly regarded and highly esteemed in the society, having by that you are possessed of all these great virtues. For you, akirtihi maranad atirichyate. For you, this akirti, meaning this ill fame, maranad atirichyate, that will be worse than death. You see, because after all, as your level of sophistication rises, different things become important to a person. In the beginning, it is only the body comforts and these gross and mundane things that are important to a person. Slowly, an emotional environment that a person has becomes important. And slowly, your name, fame, recognition, these things become important. And we find always that for what a person considers important, the person is always willing to sacrifice that which is less important. And so for the one who is highly regarded, it becomes very difficult, One who is held in highest, if he is insulted by somebody, he feels like he's destroyed. A fellow who has been all the time being humiliated or, that to him, perhaps it doesn't matter much if somebody says something to him. But then for the person who is regarded in a very high esteem, if he is insulted or if he is censured, then he will think that death is better than that. And so, maranad atirichyate. you will sambhavitasya akirtehe varam maranam ityartha. For a person who is highly regarded or held in high esteem, for such a person, death is better than ill fame, death is better than censure. And that everyone knows. That I would be willing to give up my job, I'll be willing to give up anything for my self-respect. So everybody has a value for self-respect. And we value it up to a certain point, Some people may give up nothing for self-respect. He may give up self-respect. But there are people who give up varying degrees of things for self, depending on how much respect you have. Higher the respect you have, more you'll be willing to give up. To such an extent that for the sake of your own self-respect, you may be even willing to give up life, or may be able to give up life to maintain your respect. Arjuna is in a position like that. For him the self-esteem or self-respect or self-regard is so important here, Arjuna, that you will find that when that really happens to you, you wish that you were better died. You were better dead than alive and listen to all these kind of things. Therefore, if you do not fight this battle, even in this life also, you will earn that ill fame, and therefore you will suffer in this life also. Not only you will incur sin, and therefore will invite suffering in the life hereafter, but on account of this akirti or ill fame, in this life also you are inviting suffering. So of fighting the battle, you are inviting well-being here and hereafter, and by giving up this battle, which is the right thing to do for you, you are inviting suffering here as well as hereafter. Then he says, doesn't matter. Why do you think, O Lord, that they will censure me? Don't they realize that I am taking this action out of compassion? That out of pity and compassion that I am taking the action. Won't the people be able to understand that? When they talk about me, when they will interpret my particular action in this particular situation, why should they interpret that way? Why won't they interpret my action as born out of compassion? He says, no, your action will not be interpreted as that born out of compassion. How will it be interpreted? Because people know you. And how are they going to interpret? It says in verse 35, Bhayad ranad uparatam mamsyante tvam maharatha yesham chatvam bahumatah bhutva yasyasi laghavam. Bhayad ranad uparatam. People will believe that you have run away from this battlefield out of fear. Nobody is going to give you the benefit that you are withdrawing from the battlefield out of compassion. People will think that you have run away from this. Even today also people believe that Arjuna was afraid. Out of fear he did not want to fight battle. They interpret Arjuna's response in this sense. But definitely Maharathaha, Duryodhana Prabhudaya. So Maharathas means those great warriors like Duryodhana and others. They will think that because they are not willing to give him credit anyway. They are his enemies. And how are the enemies going to look upon this? Bhayad ranat uparatam. That you have withdrawn from this, run away from this battlefield out of fear. That's what they will say. Mamsyante chintayishyanti na krupayayati. They will not give you that benefit to think that you have run out or left this battlefield out of compassion. And that this won't be looked upon as a great sacrifice. When Rama gave up the kingdom and went to forest, it was looked upon as a great sacrifice. And people sing his glories even today. But Arjuna may think in his mind that I am sacrificing this kingdom by not fighting this battle. Not at all. It won't be looked upon as sacrifice. On the other hand, it would invariably be interpreted as an act of cowardice, of having run away from the battlefield. This is all right. Yesham chatvam bahumatah bhutva yasyasi laghavam. And for whom? Yesham, for whom? For all these people, bahumatah bhutva yasyasi laghavam. So you are bahumatah. These are the people who at the moment, even they are enemies. This Duryodhana and other people who are the enemies of Arjuna, Pandavas, even though they are enemies, they still regard him in high esteem. We do that. Even though we may perhaps disagree with a person, or he may be inimical to us. But then, if we know that the person possesses certain great qualities, we do respect him for those qualities. And therefore, even your enemies such as Duryodhana, they regard you in a very high esteem, because they know that you are a great warrior, a man of great prowess and valor and courage and skill and everything else. So, bahubhi gunaihi yuktaha bahumataha. They regard you as the one possessed of great deal of virtues. And now they will say, oh, I think we judged him wrongly all this time. This is what he really is. So they will in fact disregard all their achievements, thinking that they were by chance, and this particular action will be only interpreted as your real nature. And so they will think that this fellow is a coward, and that he was fighting so far, maybe situations were favorable to him, and therefore he gained his victories. But when it came to the real test, he left the battlefield. And that is how they will look down upon you. It says, yasyasi laghavam lagubhavam. You will attain, they will look down upon you. Never you will gain that kind of a contempt from those people. And so it is not only that in future they will talk about you. Even in present also they will talk about you and they will look down upon you. He says, even then I don't mind. Suppose, okay, he doesn't talk in good terms about me, he thinks that I have run away, all right, I'll sustain that also. He says, no, not only that. In verse 36 says, avachyavadam sabhun vadishyandi tavahitaha ninnantas tava samarthyam tato dukkhatarannukim. Avachyavadan. There are people who are really crooked anyway among the enemies. And therefore, their contempt for you will not even mean decent words. They will use very indecent words for you. All kinds of words, avachyavadan, which should not be uttered, And so they will utter for you and they will describe you in those terms which cannot even be uttered by me, Lord Krishna says. No decent people will talk in this language. In that language they will talk about you. Bahun vadishyandi tvahitaha tava ahitaha. Because they are your enemies. There are good people also who will feel that this fellow has run away out of fear and therefore they will look down upon you. But the people who are positively inimical to you, how will they talk about you? They will talk about you in such words. This fellow will only call you coward, the good, but this fellow will call you something else, And that is they will talk in words which cannot even be uttered by decent people. Vadishyanti pravahitaha. Tava ahitaha, tava shatravaha. Those people who wish ill of you, meaning there are people even in the enemy camp who wish even sometimes well of him. But then they will perhaps not talk so badly of you. But those people who wish ill of you, they will have a great opportunity to talk of all kinds of ill words about you. Nindantas tava samarthyam. In your samarthyam, your strength, your prowess, nindantaha kutsayantaha. It will be ridiculed. You will be subject to ridicule, you will be subject to total censure, you will be subject to total condemnation, and your very prowess for which you stand. Arjuna is a Kshatriya, and what matters for him is that Kshatriya dharma. He is a warrior. So what is most important in his life is his being a Kshatriya or a warrior. And for warrior, that is his fame and his prowess and his self-respect and his regard, all of that is alone important. Nindantas tava samarthyam. That very samarthyam, that very ability that you have, that itself will be censured completely by them. Tataha dukkhatarannukim. What can be more painful than that? Hey Arjuna, you won't be able to suffer this. You don't know. But when you will really come to it, and when these things will really happen, then you won't be able to stand it. You think that death is better than all this. And therefore, tasmat ninda praptehe. There can be nothing worse than this ninda, nothing worse than this censure that the people will throw upon you. And therefore, dukkhatarannukim, kashtatarannukim. What is more painful? Nothing is more painful than them. And so, in these 4 verses, in the first 2 verses, Lord Krishna said the benefits to be derived by fighting this battle, because it is proper for Arjuna to do, and it will bring about for him the welfare here and hereafter. In these 4 verses, Lord Krishna said what is to be lost if he fails to fight this battle. Both the sides must be stated. Not only benefits, but then the disadvantages also. Pros and cons, both are presented by Lord Krishna to Arjuna. Okay. Om पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति।